Hey friends, by the time this goes up, it is going to be March, and we are only going to be 1 month away from tax season. So if you haven't gotten your shit figured out already, and it's starting to become an emergency situation, may I suggest my tax person, Molly Morris from m3virtualaccounting.com. If you're not sure whether Molly can help you, just set up a free consultation and talk to her about what it is you need, and she will work with you on your budget and all of your specific needs for your business. She particularly specializes in online and virtual businesses. She is wonderful. I wish so much I had hired her sooner. Do yourself a favor and go to m3virtualaccounting.com.
This is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Some Spoiled, the Song of Ice and Fire 2, the co-host Switcheroo, the rereading. Return to Westeros. HBO Spoiler Edition, uncut, uncensored, and too hot for your ear holes. Bringing you the greatest... I can't say the greatest hits from 96 anymore. That rhymed. Greatest hits from 98 doesn't rhyme. We need to come up with something that rhymes with 98. Bringing you the greats from 98. That's it.
That'll
Call
do.
in with your request now.
See, you didn't need me at all.
Hey! In this episode, we're covering chapters 70 and 71, Tyrion and Daenerys. In these chapters, Tyrion is very excited because it looks like he's gonna get out of this one, but it is not to be. And Danerys has to deal, Danerys has to deal with a really snotty fucking Jorah. Welcome to Unspoiled.
Monsters are dangerous, and just now, kings are dying like flies.
I am the king!
Fuck the king.
Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha.
I'm RoShawn.
Okay, all right. Before I really want to talk about Jorah, but we're going to start with Tyrion. We're going to do this right this time.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are.
Focused.
Yes.
Do it.
Yes.
Yes.
Here we
So,
go.
the Tyrion chapter, and you had been looking through to make sure that you knew what we were reading yesterday, and we're like, ooh, this is a long one. And I was like, it is indeed.
It is. We, I knew this was coming. I didn't know when exactly we were going to get this. I was surprised. I thought that there would be one more lead up before we got to the actual battle, or the actual champions fighting. But no, we got it. We just went right there for it. And I was reminded of just how incredibly frustrating this whole fucking thing was.
Yeah. Yep.
He is out here dancing around like he's fucking Inigo Montoya with the fucking you killed my father, prepared to die, except he did it wrong.
He did it wrong.
And
he got a little high on himself.
He ended up getting his eyeballs popped right out of his head.
Oof.
And I knew it was coming, and I was still yelling, just kill him. Just shut up and kill him.
Yep. Yeah, this is the kind of thing where it's like, look, I get that you want to make a statement and everything, especially in front of the Lannisters and all of that. But there are times for statements, and then there's times for letting your actions be the statement.
Yep.
And killing a man that pretty much everybody had low-key considered unkillable should have been enough for you.
It would have spoken volumes.
Yep.
And I'll tell you what I did forget about. I forgot that Shay takes the stand. I forgot about that part.
Yeah, I was so shocked when you were like, I wonder who it's going to be. And I was like,
I
yeah.
completely forgot that it's her. That she pulls this shit. And if y'all could have seen my face, I was over here like, like it was 100% new information.
I love when that happens. Yeah, this whole thing is, I don't remember how accurate to the show. Like, do you remember if the show was exactly the same sort of series of statements.
I don't really remember.
She is really rough here in a way that I didn't fully remember, I'll admit.
I remember being devastated when it's her during the show, but I cannot remember if she went this hard, you know?
Gotcha,
I just check Austin notes if you haven't already. But she fucking, like, there's throwing somebody under the bus, and then there's whatever the fuck this is. Mm-hmm, this was so complete. I remember on the show, I think we find out that did we find out that, what the fuck? Was there something with her and Tywin on the show? Like, I was going to say she was fucking Tywin, but that does not feel right. Like, I don't think that just feels wrong. Tywin wouldn't be sleeping with Shay, right?
It does, yeah.
So
I don't want to tell you anything because of how close we are to some stuff.
Got you. So, like, but I have like a vague memory of there's being something that was happening behind the scenes that was more than just her being forced to lie to save her own life. There was something else afoot that made it feel like, my memory feels very much like she was put in a position where, you know, she had to make a choice, and she chose like the bigger fish almost, but I can't remember exactly like the details of that. But for this chapter, she shows up, and Tyrion watching and listening to her and just being like how devastated he is.
I swear to God.
And she is on a stand just like, give this bitch an Oscar. It is quite the performance. You know, she even tells them that she had like a nice man that she was supposed to marry, and Tyrion had him.
All about
Tyrion placed him at the front of the flank so that he wouldn't survive, so Tyrion could like snatch her away, and then like the Mountain Clan basically kidnapped her and delivered her to Tyrion's tent. No, that is not how any of that went, ma'am. You know, I almost wish that Tyrion could have called some of the Mountain Clans down to testify in his defense, but I don't know how good they would have been on the stand. You know,
that's fair.
Maybe you don't want them on the stand.
Poke a lot of holes in their character pretty easily. Right? I feel, especially if they show up with the strings of ears around their neck.
Have you the fucking murder trial that's in South Carolina? That dude that killed his wife and son. You know, you know, I'm talking about the Murdaws or whatever their name is.
Yes.
We had like CNN on or whatever, and just in passing, and it cut to the trial, and he is on the stand, and me and Steve both from like different parts of the house stopped what we were doing and yelled at the TV, "You can't put a defendant on the stand!"
Oh my God!
Don't you watch Law and Order? You can't do that.
Look, I'm gonna be real with you. If I was on trial, you had better lock me the fuck in another room.
Because you're not going to shut up about
I will not be. Nope. It is absolutely not going to happen that I sit there and just let people talk shit about me and I don't get up on the stand. Are you kidding? I would be taking notes, and I would be going item by item to contradict with specifics and receipts each and every false claim. I would have that shit like just sewn up tidy. And would it help me? Probably not.
Probably
not.
Would
I feel better? Absolutely. And as a child, I am mostly preoccupied with how things feel in the moment. So that would be how I would handle
Consequences, smash. I can't even say it.
Yeah, there it is.
Consequences.
Oh my God. I, on your recommendation, have just started watching King of the Hill with Owen.
Oh, good stuff.
And there's a part where Dale has to go in and do an extermination, and somebody says, "Shouldn't you wear a mask?" And he says, "Masks, mask. Masks, masks, mask. Mask, mask, mask." That's it. There it is. Mask, mask. And I laughed so hard. He had to sound it out like he was in third grade.
Listen, it bees like that sometimes.
It does, though. Oof, man.
Oh, good. I'm glad you guys are doing a rewatch. Have fun with that.
There's also the dude who's the blonde who just talks with like no
Boomhauser.
That's I talked to you about Owen suggesting a neighborhood watch character who does not care about anything and is very lackadaisical. And now I want a character who is practically indecipherable also. So I'm just making a little list of like flavor to add to this story that are. I think I'm going to have a pretty unfocused mystery, if I'm being honest with you guys. Which is sort of like a Sookie Stackhouse thing where it's like mostly vibes. And the mystery just gets wrapped up in like 2 chapters at the very end and you had forgotten all about it in the meantime.
You're like, oh, that's right. We were solving a crime.
Right. Oh, somebody was dead.
Right. I got caught up in all this other more exciting, interesting shit. Completely forgot about the murder.
So anyway, but this testimony by her, it's so rough because like you like Tyrion, you care about Tyrion, you know he didn't do this thing, and the way it's all stacked against him is all so fucked up. But then there's a big part of me that has a lot of sympathy for Shay's situation, in that like if she was told to make this testimony in the first place, I have to assume that the alternative that they offered her if she didn't do this was probably pretty fucking horrific.
Right.
You know? So like as much as she is awful here, and I don't expect Tyrion to ever forgive her, there's also a part of me that like considering how little the small folk are ever considered in what happens when they make their major decisions in this country, I can't help but be a little bit like, how's it feel?
Right.
You know, when they finally get put in a place where they have any sort of power over you, like, that's what it's like for them all the time.
It's really like, and to your point about like just the sort of, the power dynamic, when she is first escorted into court, the first thing Tyrion thinks to himself is, she doesn't know anything. She can't hurt me. You know, like just like I'm going to use the word dismissive because that's what it is here, even though I don't mean like the entire connotation of the word. But this moment when he sees her, it is immediately like, she doesn't know
what power
anything.
has she got?
What power does she have? Like, one, it doesn't seem to occur to him that she could just fucking get up on a stand and lie.
Nope.
You know,
this is the thing with honest folks. We don't think about that. When people just start lying, we're like, wait.
Like, what? We're just out here lying now?
It's like always shocking to me whenever I come across somebody who just lies. I'm always really, it takes me a moment to like remember, oh yeah, some folks just move through the world like this.
Just, no problem. Don't even break a sweat.
Yep.
And she gets on the stand and she just like has this whole fucking story, y'all. She has overheard him and Sansa plotting. They came up after Robb was murdered. This was their revenge. He was also planning on killing Cersei and Tywin down the road, and eventually was going to kill Tommen as well, just so he could steal the crown and the throne. And at one point, Oberyn is like, hold up. I understand that you were the lady's maid, but this is a lot of fucking information you claim to have about all of this, you know, all of these plots and plans. And so she's just like, well, one, they were reckless and spoke around me too much, Sansa as well, but I was also fucking him. And then she brings that into the fucking story.
Yep.
Where she is an unwilling, not consenting to them having sex, that he dragged her down to the monster room.
Right. And like told him how, oh, I'm going to get to fuck you in a way that Joffrey's never going to get to fuck his wife, which is like, the whole thing is just so melodramatic. But
she's crying and sobbing on the stand. I was never supposed to be a whore. This is when she talks about her brave boy that she was supposed to marry. And then she says something about how Tyrion had brought her to the city, and then starts to do like unspeakable, shameful things. And Oberyn is like, really?
Oh my God, I could not stop laughing.
What sorts of things?
the Prince Oberyn looked curious. I love how understated that line is. It's not like, oh, his eyebrows went up and he leaned forward and he leered. It's just, looked curious. What sorts of things? Like, there's something about how relaxed he is with it, but also he still asks the question.
Yeah,
though.
He does.
I just found that so funny.
I laughed as well, and I wasn't like, I'm like, is that supposed to be a joke? Because I really want that to be a joke. I want that to be there for me to laugh, because it really made me laugh. And yeah, and then she goes on and on, but then she does, which is the real like final twist of the knife, is he used to make me call him giant. He used to make me tell him how big he was. I used to call him my giant of Lannister, which we as readers, we know that's not how the fuck that went down.
It is certainly not.
And
it was an endearment that she made up.
And the way the entire court just cannot contain their laughter at this. You know, they cannot stop laughing. Everyone. And he is sitting there with all of this mocking laughter around him. The woman that he loves, or that he's in love with, whether it makes sense to be or not, has just betrayed him in just the worst way imaginable.
Yeah.
And he is thinking, I fucking saved you assholes. I should have let this fucking city burn. Like, you know, and everyone is laughing except his dad, who we all know doesn't laugh.
Yeah, he doesn't know what that is. He's never heard of that.
And this pushes Tyrion like over the edge, and he just gets up and yells and tells them that, get Shay out of here, get this lying whore out of my sight, and I'll give you your confession. And now Tywin is engaged, and they have Shay escorted out. And Tyrion thinks to himself as he's watching her, like, one, he says he can't tell what he sees in her eyes. Was it shame or was it fear? And then he thinks to himself, you know, you're going to get whatever Cersei promised you, you know, whatever it was, the gold, your jewels, whatever. But before the fucking moon is turned, she'll have you entertaining the gold cloaks. And that, I was just like, you know what? Because people, whoever engaged her in this lie and put her in a position to take the stand, they're not going to, whatever their bargain was with her, whatever deal they struck with her, they're ultimately not going to hold up their end of it.
Definitely
because those kind of people never do.
Yeah.
And this is when he yells to everybody, you know what? I am guilty. I'm guilty. Is that what you fucking want to hear? And they get all excited. What? You did it? You poisoned the king? And he does not admit guilt to that at all. He continues to say he's innocent. But basically, it's just like, yeah, but what I am guilty of is being born the way I'm born. That's it. That's what this is really all about. And his dad gets so pissed.
Yeah. And he thought that we were about to have this matter settled, and then his whole speech here.
Yep. Yep. And Tyrion's just like, yeah, no, we're not going to do it the easy way. Basically, to his dad. You want it to be handled nice. Keep your hands relatively clean. Also be able to tell yourself how you saved my undeserving life, you know, and got me up to the wall, whatever fantasy you were going to tell yourself about what kind of father you were. But I'm not going to let you have any of that. Nope. Not letting you get off the hook that easy. And I demand a trial by battle. And people lose their fucking mind, y'all. The crowd goes wild.
And I do like when at first he says, I'm going to do trial by combat. Cersei's like, ha, got him. And then when Oberyn is like, and it's going to be me that fights, she's like, fuck.
Yep.
There's a moment of her thinking, clearly, maybe I misjudged this whole thing.
And Tyrion gets to see it. And it's like it's small consolation, but it's consolation all the same. So yeah, Oberyn is going to be the champion. Tywin is not happy. It says, Lord Tywin's face was so dark that for half a heartbeat, Tyrion wondered if he drunk some poison wine too. Yeah. So then we get like some in between, I guess like this part of the procedure is over for the day. Tywin like calls it a wrap. And leaves. And then there's some time where, you guys, he asked Pod, do you think I did it? And Pod can't answer.
I hated that.
What? Come on. I like to think he was just too caught up. You know, he's not great at answering anybody.
That's true.
I'm choosing to believe he was just so many conflicting emotions popped up and he didn't know how to express himself clearly and quickly in the moment. Because my pod would never. He just would never. He would know. He would know that Tyrion didn't do this. And so then, he spends some time with Oberyn as he's preparing for battle. Like he's getting, dressed and putting all his gear. And they have
there's something so funny about how like obsessive Tyrion is about everything he's doing. Because, he's trying not to be a control freak. He's not the warrior, but he's like, should you be drinking? I feel like maybe I have some of this Gatorade over here that would probably be better for your electrolyte count. And also that can cause your judgment to be a little bit skewed. Dehydration, that's a real concern. Also, I see you have a spear.
When he sees that spear.
Really feeling the spear. This whole thing, he's just trying so hard.
When that spear comes out, Tyrion is just like, oh, get the fuck out of here. You don't think you're taking Matt to go fight the mountain, do you? Have you heard? I just told you how big he was. Were you not paying attention?
Yep.
But there's also some sort of, we get this story, which we had known about this, that Oberyn and his sister go on like this for the Westeros World Tour. And end up in Castle Rock. We had learned that earlier. But what he shares with us in this moment is that his mother and Tyrion's mom were actually friends from childhood. And that the suspicion was the two kids from Dorne were going to Castle Rock to maybe set up a marriage. If not between Oberyn and Cersei, maybe his sister and Jaime, or maybe both.
Right.
But before they get there, their mother has died. Cersei and Tyrion, Jaime's mother, has died before they get to Casterly Rock. And we find out that when the marriage pact was sort of proposed after like an appropriate mourning period, Tywin is like, no, to neither one of y'all. But you can have this baby that was just born. They just killed my wife in childbirth or shortly thereafter. And, it's not what you would expect him to be, if we're going to try to figure how Tywin would say it nicely.
How would Tywin say it? God, that's a good question.
The best I can do is
because the whole point feels like he's going to try. He wants it to be an insult, doesn't he?
Yeah, it feels very much like it does. It feels It feels very much like this match that maybe because it feels like between Prince Oberyn's mom and Cersei and Tyrion's mom that they had an understanding of what might be getting ready to happen. Oh, because there's this wonderful line that says, he says something like, Tywin rules the Seven Kingdoms, but his wife rules him. Something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Right. So, I'm trying to find the spot here because it's like a long story.
Yeah.
It reminds me of in Big Fat Greek Wedding when she says the man is the head of the family, but the woman is the neck, and she turns the head whichever way she wants.
Yeah, it's something that he says to Tyrion. So he's talking about this marriage proposal that could have, was kind of the moms were in cahoots about. And then it says that your lady mother meant to betroth Jaime to my sister, or Cersei to me, or perhaps both. And then Tyrion is like, but my dad, and then Oberyn cuts him off and says, ruled the Seven Kingdoms, but was ruled at home by his lady wife, or so my mother always said it. So with the mom gone, and understanding that Tywin probably was not going to agree to this and would have had to be sort of cajoled or coaxed by his wife into accepting it, with her gone, Tywin is just like, absolutely not.
Yeah,
I got bigger ideas for my children. My daughter's going to be a queen or nothing, or, whatever. And so this idea that, what does he say? He says, your father is not a man to forget such slights. The fact that Rhaegar takes, is it Elia or Elia? We've been through this before. Elia. So Rhaegar takes Elia instead of Cersei, and Tywin is salty about it forever.
Yep. Yep, he holds a grudge.
Yeah, he does. Your father is not a man to forget such slights. He taught that lesson, and then there's just like a list of people he taught that lesson to that we've learned about. You know, the Tarbecks and the Rains. And then Oberyn says at King's Landing he taught it to my sister. Ty going back to the idea that Tywin is who sicked the mountain.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, one to his sister as punishment for being chosen over Cersei. Tywin is so petty, y'all.
He is. He does not forget shit. He's an elephant. There's also, I really do want to talk about this cracked me up. So he's talking Oberyn about his sister and all her suitors. I prefer to amuse myself by mocking my sister's suitors. There was little Lord Lazy Eye, Squire Squish Lips, one I named the Whale That Walks, that sort of thing. The only one who was even halfway presentable was young Baelor Hightower, a pretty lad, and my sister was half in love with him, until he had the misfortune to fart once in our presence. I promptly named him Baelor Breakwind, and after that Elia couldn't look at him without laughing.
Just
I was a monstrous young fellow. Someone should have sliced out my vile tongue. Yes, Tyrion agreed silently. He wondered how many lives had been snuffed out by that fart.
Mm-hmm. That's really, like, that's so great. One, because it's just such a fucking thing a teenage boy would do.
100%.
But then the sort of implication that, like, if she had just wed, to the Hightowers, then everything else that happened wouldn't have happened. She wouldn't have been married to Rhaegar. They wouldn't have been in King's Landing. They wouldn't have needed to be murdered in order for Robert to take the throne. Like, all that. They just would have been out of it.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a lot to place on a little boy, Like, you just fucking, like, you just kept your mouth shut.
Just shut the fuck up. But he is incapable, as am I.
Yeah. And it's funny, too, because, like, we find out in a page or two how, your fucking tongue, shut up, dude. Just shut up and do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Stop so much fucking talking.
So then, let's see. I'm trying to find the spot where we transition here. Okay, yeah. So we go from him getting dressed. It looked as though 1,000 people had come to see if he would live or die. And this is a really interesting thing for me because of the fact that, like, all of these people are gathered around, but there's not anything to hold them back from the midst of the fight other than the gold cloaks, which just feels like a bad idea considering that we know what Gregor is like. And I feel like if anybody didn't think that was going to be exactly how this went, I don't know what to tell you. But, evidently nobody thought of it.
This is a very weird choice to have it like in this yard that they're in. Tyrion even thinks to himself, like, we should be at the dragon pits for this shit, and we could have fucking charged money.
Yes,
we could have charged a penny a head and paid for Joffrey's wedding and his funeral. But the families have shown up. They brought children with them. Some of them have brought chairs, which I just could not stop giggling about. I'm so sorry.
I really enjoy that. They've got little coolers with them. They're pulling out a White Claw.
They're fucking tailgating.
Potato chips. Yep. Just enjoying their day.
Yeah, just coming out to see a little bit of death. No big deal. On the afternoon, and then Cersei is there with the mountain, and I mean, this description of him is just like, how are you going to fight this? I think even there's a line, somebody is like, you're going to fight that?
Yeah.
To which Oberyn is just like, I'm going to kill that. And I really desperately wanted that to be true.
I know, right?
I wanted it so badly to be true. I was like, there was a small part of me that was like, maybe it'll be different in the books. Maybe it'll be different. It was not different.
Reader.
Yeah. So we get a fight that ends up looking like Oberyn is going to take it. All the stuff that he had said to Tyrion while he was getting dressed, starting to like pan out. He's a lot faster than Gregor is. He's dancing circles around him at one point, literally. He's got all this heavy mail on. Gregor is wearing one of those helms with just a little tiny slit of a visor, so he can barely see. He's got no peripheral vision. You know, it's really looking like it might be okay. And he gets him on the ground, which he had said earlier that once they go down, like, that's going to be it. That's a wrap. They can't get back up. So I'm like, all right, here we go. He's on the ground. Here we go. And then
deep sighs.
Yeah, there's a lot of Gregor just telling him to shut up throughout the fight. He's like telling him to be quiet, shut up, you know.
There was something kind of amusing about that.
Yeah, and it feels like, oh, he's really like getting him, and the repetition is distracting Gregor, right? Like, it's getting under his skin. That's going to work in our favor. That's great.
Yep.
You know, and it does work until it fucking doesn't work.
Oberyn is toying with him, said Ilaria Sand. That is fool's play, thought Tyrion. The mountain is too bloody big to be any man's toy.
Mm-hmm.
And we got all these people that are inching forward, and then all of these folks like rush to get out of the way as Gregor loses his temper and begins to really lunge at him. And one of these kids loses an arm, and when he starts screaming, Gregor yells, "Shut up," again, and slices the top of his head off.
Yeah.
That causes everybody to suddenly be like, you know what? I'm going to take seats in the back.
Yeah, all of a sudden everybody's like, oh shit, this just got real. And like, they were here for justice, you know, to watch Tyrion get his justice, you know, and see him end up getting his head chopped off. Like, this wasn't supposed to cost them anything. And then they realized, well, shit, I am also in danger here. Because the rich people, once again, they don't care about y'all.
They do not.
Like, they let y'all swarm all up in there like that. Like, why? Why was that an option? It doesn't matter. Your lives don't matter. And, at one point he goes down, and I think he, like, catches him, Oberyn by the ankle or some shit, you know? And,
yep, grabs him and pulls him down.
And that's it. Gets him in this fucking bear hug. And it says that Tyrion saw with horror that the mountain had wrapped one huge arm around the prince, drawing him tight against his chest like a lover. And then Gregor decides it's his turn to talk. And it's not.
This is rough.
It's not good. Because he had been doing this thing the whole time. Every time Oberyn asked, like, he's like, who's her? Her? I don't know that name. I don't know what you're talking about, you know? She's so insignificant. I've killed so many people and raped so many people. I don't even know who you're talking about. I'm not going to say her name. Because Oberyn wants him to say her name. And the mountain won't until he's got the upper hand. And then he says it. Yeah. And he says that I killed...
I don't remember if he says this in the show. And I looked for my notes. I don't think that Austin had a chance to send me notes for this episode. But I feel like they just have the mountain kill him, and they don't have him say this speech.
I can't remember.
And I may be wrong about that, but...
Yeah. It's if they chose to keep it out, I'd be curious. Maybe they thought that the burst in his head like a grape was enough, and they didn't want to double down.
I get the feeling that they didn't want Sir Gregor to really be a talking character. They wanted him to be a monster figure that felt more like an animal than a person, because they really didn't do a lot with him speaking, even though we see him speak in the book a fair amount. It's not a ton, but there's, you know, he has his moments. He barely speaks in the show at all.
True. I'm curious. Like, I don't know anything. I know that there were different actors that portrayed the mountain over the course of the show. It was at least
that might have
two.
been part of it too.
I'm wondering if maybe because, you know, casting somebody to play this character, like your actress pool's got to be kind of, you know what I mean, a little shallow. So maybe they just figured they didn't want to give somebody that didn't have a lot of acting experience, a lot of, you know, lines to perform and everything. But yeah, I can't honestly remember if we get this speech on the show or not. But here he's just like, he says her whole name, and he says, I killed her screaming whelp. Then I raped her. And as he's saying this, we get like he thrusts his free hand into Oberyn's face, pushing steel fingers into his eyes, slammed his fist into the Dornishman's mouth, making splinters of his teeth. And then Gregor says, then I smashed her fucking head in like this. And then, yeah.
As he drew back his huge fist, the blood on his gauntlet seemed to smoke in the cold dawn air. Which, man, that is a fucking image.
Yeah.
And then Tyrion, who had had a really hearty breakfast and was feeling pretty good about things, throws all of that up and gets dragged away. And he's thinking they're not going towards my little room, and realizes that they're taking him to the black cells. And he's like, fuck.
Yeah. There was a sickening crunch with that final punch, which, like, the punch somebody's and caved her whole fucking skull in, like, Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
He never hears his father say the words either that condemned him, which I don't. It says he never heard his father speak the words. Don't know if that means Tywin doesn't say it or Tyrion is just so fucking out of it that he just doesn't hear it. Like, he doesn't hear his father pronounce like guilty, in the sentence's death. And then he gets dragged away, laughing hysterically. And then what you said, he realizes he's heading to the black cells. He also says, I put my life in the Red Viper's hands, and he dropped it. And y'all,
when he remembered too late that snakes had no hands, Tyrion began to laugh hysterically.
Yeah, you guys.
Yeah.
It is
cracked a little bit.
Yeah, it's and like my memory of the show is spotty about what happens after this, but I do remember on the show they have Tyrion kill his father with a crossbow, and if I'm not mistaken, it's tied to the weird memory I have of Shay. Like, did they do a thing where he walks in and catches Shay fucking Tywin on the show? Is that what they did? I can't remember.
You can tell.
But I feel like he shoots him with a crossbow. And this part, I don't know if it's from the show or if it's from chatter on the internet or if I completely made it up. But was Tywin on the toilet when Tyrion shoots him? Or did the show not do that and people were salty because the show didn't do it? I can't remember how it works, but I'll be honest with you guys. There's a little flimsy memory that has something to do with Tywin being on the shitter when Tyrion shows up to shoot him with the crossbow. And then after that, I can't remember how, because I know that Tyrion, like, he gets away on the show and he's basically a fugitive, but I can't remember the particulars, On the show, too, on the show, Jaime comes to visit Tyrion in the cells, but we didn't get that in the book. Jaime doesn't go visit him, does he?
No, I mean, he hasn't come to see him here.
I just wanted to make sure I hadn't forgot it because, I'd be forgetting shit. But
Jaime, he has like the end of his chapter is something like he had debts to settle, but then we don't see him again. So
and that's the other reason too. I thought there was more time because I hadn't seen Jaime and Tyrion together yet, and I was like, well, we're gonna have to have that before we get to this. But no, we just got right to this. So.
Indeed.
So that's an interesting choice. I guess the show had really leaned into. That's something else too. I don't know if we really talked about too much, but on the show there was a constant reminder of how close Jaime and Tyrion are, and that Cersei is kind of what's in between them. And we get a little bit of that in the book. We know that Tyrion, loves his big brother and feels a certain amount of closeness with them. And we are in Jaime's POV. We know that he, doesn't think that Tyrion's the monster that Cersei does. But I don't know how much time we've seen them actually be together. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, there's a lot of, like, we see Tyrion considering his brother in his POV, and we see Jaime considering his brother in his, but not really them two together a lot. And it feels like the show leans into that relationship like a little bit more. So maybe that's why they had Jaime come visit him in the cells, to like build on that,
That was something that I kind of liked. Like, as much as I wasn't a fan of certain things the show did, there are some relationships that I thought were fun to watch in a fan fiction sort of way on the show. And watching Jaime and Tyrion have more time together and watching, like, for example, Arya and Tywin encounter one another. Those were all pretty fun.
Yeah.
Even though they were not in the books.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the whole cupbearer thing for Tywin was not in the book at all. Yeah, that was fun to watch on the show.
It was, right?
Yeah, that was. That was a lot of fun.
The two of them bounced off each other really well.
Agreed. All right, and then the next chapter. This was
yeah. Now we've got Daenerys.
This is it's been a minute. Last time we saw them, she had just sent her rats into the sewers to attack the city. That's the last we've seen of her, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we are on the other side of that. Her siege was successful. They took the city. She's in power now. She's installed at that pyramid that they've taken over. Her rats are still on punishment at this point.
Oh, I was like, her rat. It took me a minute to understand what you meant by that.
Yeah,
I got you.
Her sewer rats.
I thought she meant her little pets that she has now. She feeds them in a little cage. For why? I don't know.
Imagine if she rolled into a city and instead of 3 dragons, she's got 3 rats. And then she's just like, I don't know how the story got so out of control. I never told anybody they were dragons.
Everybody just kept saying, oh my God, look at the dragons. And I was like, I guess.
What a ridiculous thing to say. I'm sorry. But yeah, so she is feeling still, she's still reeling from the betrayal, even though she's had the success in capturing the city. She's still feeling very sort of unmoored, and missing their counsel, as she's trying to figure out what to do with this place that she's just sort of, conquered. And she's feeling really lonely and alone, which, I maintain are 2 different things.
Yeah, this was an interesting, perspective when she's talking about the story from Missandei, the Lord of Harmony, who was one of the gods that the people of Noth worship, the only god that they worship. She thinks, poor Lord of Harmony, Dany pitied him. It must be terrible to be alone for all time, attended by hordes of butterfly women you could make or unmake at a word. And that was a really wild thought. The concept of the only companions that I have are people that I have created that aren't real and aren't really separate of me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really sad.
Mm-hmm.
That sucks, it just was. I agreed with her. Just poor Lord of Harmony indeed. That's a cool idea for a god, but it isn't the kind of god that sounds like I want to be anything. I don't want to be part of that.
I mean, it sounds, it doesn't sound that different from sort of Christian,
Yeah, I guess that's true because he made the angels. I guess. What is the deal with that? What is it?
I don't know if I am in a position to get into all that. I mean, he made them, and then they weren't good enough. Did we see him make them?
It's not like one of the days, right?
Oh, no.
It's not on the 3rd day he made the angels.
I don't think so. I think that story is just about Earth.
Gotcha.
Unless you talk to a particular type of person, then they will say it's about the whole universe. But I was always kind of taught that it was about Earth, and that God and the angels were out there. That He had already created the angels, and there are multiple worlds out there. And then He decided that this is my the best I can piece together of my limited Christian learning is that He gets kind of bored of the angels because they're not really super exciting with the no free will thing.
That sounds right.
And then and then He creates humans and gives us free will because it's more interesting. Because again, lonely and bored.
Yeah, I mean, God, I'm just like the so I've talked about the podcast Complete Guide to Everything before, and they sort of, I won't go into the whole reason why this happened, but accidentally wound up with a book club covering the Bible, which was not intentional. And they are both were raised Catholic, but have like no memory of anything they were taught, which is really wild to listen to, because like, I don't know how you go to catechism at such a young age and just don't remember anything that you were taught. But because I remember fucking everything, you know, and I didn't go to official schooling like that, but they are beginning at the beginning with Genesis. And Tim just stops and says, all right, my first question about all this, who's God? And it's just like silence. And Tom is like, well, Tim. And Tim interrupts and is like, I mean, like, do we get a prequel? Are we ever going to find out his backstory? Where he comes from? What happened with that? And I just fell out because, like, honestly, that's the only question, isn't it? Like, when you just read the Bible, but what it comes down to is just, wait. Who's this guy? That brings everything to a screeching fucking halt. And I just couldn't get it because I don't think he intended it to be that deep a question when he asked it. But once he asked it, it was very clear, like, oh, we're not getting through Genesis tonight, are we? If we talk about this, like, anyway, so this situation is Dany trying to avoid dealing with the men who have betrayed her, finally realizing that she has no choice and she's going to have to face up to them. She is eating and getting dressed and talking to Missandei about Noth, where she's from. And there's a mention of the butterfly spirits that a lot of people like come to Noth acting like they're going to take over. And then they get really sick. And this is some information that I think Austin shared in the Discord about how the butterflies carry some sort of, like, I don't remember if it's a parasite or a virus, but it's the butterflies themselves that are what carries the thing that kills people.
And she says,
that has been what managed to keep them from being taken over by people. They still get fucking slaved though.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a bit here where she says the butterflies do not help them when the slave ships come raiding though. And it's in italics, so you guys know
this is her thought.
This is like, is that Daenerys thinking that as Missandei is telling her about the butterflies.
Yeah.
And then Dany promises to take her home one day. And then there's also a bit, and I don't know if it's right here or if it's later, where she says to Missandei basically like, please don't ever betray me.
It's later. It's after she says goodbye to them. Well, goodbye to Jorah only, I guess.
Yeah, and it's so heartbreaking. Of course, Missandei is like, I would never. And she would never, I hope, also in the books. Because in the show she didn't. So I'm hoping that, you know, that ends up being true. But, so she's got, the other thing that's happening throughout this whole chapter are the goddamn flies.
Yeah, right. This is interesting.
Yeah, George Martin does this thing sometimes where like the smallest little detail will work so perfectly and be just as distracting or as upsetting as it is to the characters that it's happening to. I find this when he's talking about traveling sometimes, especially if it's like mountains, you know, or you know, scary passes that they have to cross. Sometimes it's when he's at the wall and he's talking about just how cold it is, and I'll be reading it and I just be like, oh, this is the worst. I hate it. You know, it's so uncomfortable. So like the flies did that for me here, where, you know, it keeps coming up. Somebody's like, there was a fly in my ale and I swallowed it. And then later, finally, somebody is like, yeah, it's the corpses. I think it's Dario is like, flies are the dead man's revenge.
Yeah. The dead man's revenge. I was like, wow. I like that.
But
that works.
Yeah. So I was just like, oh, what a weirdly like slightly innocuous thing to include, but also when you think about it, it's deeply ominous, and you're just like, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, well done on that.
Especially if anybody listening has like lived under assault of flies at any point in your life.
Oh my God.
You know how it wears your fucking spirit down, man.
It really does. It really
does. Oh, the worst.
Yeah.
I remember when I worked at the goat farm, and there were a couple times where I was just like struggling so bad because the flies were just up in my face. Ugh. And I was just it's a barn, there's no doing anything, you can't get them out, you know, like they would have those strips of like fly paper that were just like coated on either side with flies, and it was just like, why is this here? That's doing absolutely nothing. Like, is it catching some? Yes, but when there's 200 and it caught 30, I don't care. It doesn't matter. And it was really weird how used to it I got, because when I first started working there, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to deal with this. I'm walking into a room surrounded. They're all over. They're on everything. Everything you leave sitting. Every time you stand still long enough, and then it was like, I just didn't even notice them anymore. They were just background. Wow. I didn't think I'd be able to get used to them, because I am very sensitive to bugs. I hate bugs. I understand their importance in our ecosystem, and I respect that. But stay the fuck out of my personal space. And yet I wound up being kind of like, oh, the flies. Yeah, I forgot that they can get pretty bad, right?
The things that we get acclimated to, and in the short amount of time that we do it, should actually be terrifying to all of us. How quickly we get used to shit. Because I mean, look at, I don't want to derail us too much, but just think about where we were. Just think about our world and how about life. Exactly. And how much shit we just tolerate now. Like, whoop, that's just how it is. That's how that works. Yeah. For horror movies have used flies so effectively over the years that like just a swarm of them will just creep me the fuck out. Like, oh Definitely. God, this place is haunted. It's got a bunch of flies.
What was it that I was reading? Oh, it was that movie Candyman, where he's got the bees all over him.
No, thank you. I've never seen a Candyman movie.
I haven't seen it either, but I read that he had it written into his contract that every time he got stung, he got paid like $100. So he made like this big ass bonus when the movie ended, because he had been stung so many times.
Like, can we not use CGI bees? Why is this man walking around
they
with
could
real
not
bees?
Then. When was that made? Like,
fair.
The 80s?
Fair enough. I think it's like a 90s movie. Like 95 maybe. I don't know.
80s, 90s, it's all the same.
At this point, it is all the same. It really is.
It feels it.
So that is fucking sad. Oh my God, I just like, I don't even want to go on with this podcast now.
There was something I read the other day about how like that 70s show was more recent when it was made than that 90s show is now. And I was just like, nobody asked you.
Yep.
Who asked that question? Not I.
My brother.
Leave it in the vault.
Me on my birthday to remind me that when we were little kids, the oldies station played stuff from the 60s, and I was a little kid in the 80s, so there was about a 20-year difference. Which means that my music that I identify with as my generational music is even older than what I used to think the oldies were, because my music is now 30 years old.
Whoop.
Exactly. On the day of my birth, you call me with that bullshit. How dare.
Come into my house.
How
you just give me his address, I'll have him taken care of for you. I'll hand him over to my producer, who definitely exists.
So okay, all right, let's get back to what's happening here. There's flies. We figure out it's because there's a lot of dead bodies laying around. We find out a little bit more about the strategy to get into Mereen and how they took the city, which is a turtle of their own. which is funny because we watched Jon deal with a turtle up at the wall. And here we are, another one. Only they used one of their ships. And then just...
Yeah, this is wild.
Yeah, turned it into a battering ram and built all this sort of, not defensive, offensive weaponry, catapults and all kinds of shit on it. Covered it with a bunch of, like, hides and shit. And meanwhile sent Jorah, Selmy, I think Boaz maybe went with them, or was it the other guy, Ben Plume? Ben
Plum. Yeah.
And then like an assortment.
Ben Plum.
Brown, yes. And then like an assortment of Unsullied followed them, and they go into the city and head for the fighting pits and unchain all of those guys down there so that they could bring the ruckus upstairs. And it doesn't take long. It doesn't take much. And they have the city in hand, and they have to figure out what are we going to do next.
Mm-hmm.
And we find out that
it's surprising how quick that happens, but
yeah,
good for her.
Right. So she rides into the city. They have some of the masters and some of the wealthy people all kind of tied up together in the town center or whatever the fuck, trying to figure out what are we going to do. And Danny says, if you give your leaders up, the rest of you can go.
Yes.
And there's an old woman who says, how many do you have to have? And Danny says 163, which is the number that we remember she had counted of the, what was it called? That terrible trail where everybody was like Punishers, whatever. You know what I'm talking about.
Was there a name for it? I didn't remember that. I know that they nail the kids up, but I didn't recall that there was like a title.
I thought there was, but it might not have been. Maybe it's just something that she called it herself, like as she was walking it. But that's the number she needs. And after she has that done, she has them nailed to the post around the plaza. And
are you thinking of the Plaza of Punishment? That was a different thing, though.
I'm thinking of
doesn't matter. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the children, but maybe I got the name from the other thing. But so she does this, has these masters posted up, and then she starts to doubt herself. Mm-hmm. And she starts to tell herself, no, what I did was just. I did it for the children. Like, what I'm doing now is not the same as what these people were doing,
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that, like, because she doesn't have this internal stuff going on in the show. So when she does this, it makes her seem a lot more heartless because you don't hear her thinking to herself, ooh, yikes, this is fucked up. You know what I mean? And I appreciate her just asking herself, is this how I want to be? Do I want to live like this?
And she asks herself more than once. These moments, these doubts pop up in her head a couple times where she's just not like super comfortable with what she has done. Like a little bit later, she's I don't know, she's talking to somebody, and maybe she's talking to somebody, and she says, as she's remembering what she felt when she had seen the Plaza of Punishment, she thinks to herself, I made a horror just as great, but surely they deserved it. Harsh justice is still justice. Just trying to find like a balance,
Yeah.
And that she's really struggling with it, which works really great later on in this chapter when we get the conversation with her and Selmy, and he tells her about her father.
Yeah.
It's
like there's a little awareness in her that is there before he tells her that, and then him telling her that starts a little bit of like, oh no.
Yep, exactly. I read in a comment thread the other day, I don't know why, but there's been a lot of Game of Thrones content on my timeline recently. I cannot figure out why. But someone in the comments said the reason we're not getting this last book is because George Martin gave HBO a proper outline of how his story was going to end. And that's what they used for season 8. And then he saw how poorly it was received and that's why he doesn't have a book ready. I somehow had never heard that before, or forgot I had heard that. Did he give them an outline?
Yeah, he gave him a broad strokes outline.
Huh.
Yeah.
Do you have any feeling about whether, like, how close they stayed to his outline? Do you have ideas about?
Personally, I think that probably where Dany ends up in the show is where she winds up in the books, but I think it's just done in a way that actually makes sense.
Okay.
And in a way that you probably personally get why it's happening this way, and it doesn't feel so like,
completely
well, she's
out of
just a
left
crazy
field.
bitch, you know how, you know.
Bitches be crazy.
Indeed they be. Indeed they be. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot of stuff that, like, I could see, even if it did go a certain way, it's like they used a different character as a stand-in for something happening to somebody that perhaps in the books exists but doesn't exist in the show.
Oh.
That kind of thing, you know what I mean?
Gotcha, yeah.
Because that's they do that a lot, where they like condense events and characters together. So I could see that, like, maybe it's there are things that it looks like happened to so and so, and in the show you're kind of like, what, why? But then when you see it in the book, it happens to somebody else, and it makes a lot more sense as well. So, but that's just guessing. Do
you think he's ever going to put the book out?
I don't think that they're wrong entirely about their guess here. My thing is that and this is something that I think Candace has mentioned as well. Candace's theory was like, the fact that the story has basically been sort of spoiled in a lot of places for us, and that he has always been somebody who works really slowly and feels a lot of pressure, and that the fandom has grown so exponentially because of the show and everything. It has made him overly perfectionistic so that he can't get any forward momentum because he is so sort of self-conscious at this point. I don't want to say completely that it's like, oh, it wasn't well received and so he's trying to sort of backpedal. But I think that it's like the vibe is in general kind of true, where he's realizing like, oh, people had very strong reactions and I kind of don't want to hear it if I do this and that, and people are just going to compare everything. So yeah, I don't know. It's a weird thing where I'm like, I kind of see what they mean, but I also I feel like that's also almost somehow like giving him too much slack.
Yeah.
Making it be like everybody was such a dick that now he doesn't even want to finish.
Right. We ruined writing for him.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Which we probably did.
Honestly. And the thing is, man, like, you were the one who promised that this wasn't going to overtake you, and you kept failing to deliver. So if this is the spot you're in now, I don't really have a lot of sympathy, because you signed the fucking dotted line knowing how the pacing of the show was going to be produced, and knowing how long you normally have between books in the best of times. So that's sort of also on you.
Yeah, and you also continue to take on these other projects. I can't believe it's been as long as it's been since that last season.
Yeah.
I keep thinking it was like 2 years ago. That shit was not 2 years ago.
No, what is it now? Like 5?
Like
6?
almost 5 years, I think.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I didn't mean to sidetrack us so much. It's just like I said, I had been seeing a weird amount of fucking Game of Thrones related content.
Yeah, that's weird.
I have no idea why. It just keeps popping up in my feed.
I just personally am somebody who also really struggles with wanting things to be perfect before I like do any forward movement. So I really do sympathize with kind of struggling with that. But it's, you know, there was this really fascinating, there's this book I think I've talked to you about called Atomic Habits. And he was talking about there being two different like photography. There was one class and two different final projects. And one of them was you have to turn in one photo that has to be spectacular, and that will be like your whole final grade is this one photo. And then the other project was you take as many photos as you can. And the people who struggled to find the perfect photo made a lot less progress in terms of their skill level going up because they were so obsessive. And the people who were taking photos left and right all over the place were getting so much practice that the quality of their work started to increase a lot because they were just out here experimenting and doing stuff wildly without really worrying about whether or not it was perfect in the moment. And that really hit me when I read that. I was just like, oh, I feel super called out right now. But anyway, yeah, I feel like George needs a little bit of Atomic Habits in his life. That's all I'm saying.
Just start writing. Just start writing until it starts feeling right again. Starts feeling like your voice. Oh my God, ma'am.
You did it, not me. You did it, not me. I'm not responsible. All right. So she is greeting them in the morning, and there had been like this thing that she did with the sacking of the next couple of days after the sacking is complete. She was basically like, yeah, so what we're not going to do is just let you guys go completely off the chain for like weeks at a time. I need y'all to rein in the murdering and the robbing and the raping.
Yeah, yeah.
So she has people who steal get their hands cut off, and guys who rape get their dicks cut off. And they present her with this big basket full of hands and dicks. And I was just like, oh, God. 8 killers swung from the walls. So this is when she tells them, all right, well, since these flies are really starting to bug me, take down all the corpses and we'll get rid of them so we don't have the flies hanging around.
Fucking Brown Ben is like, you're going to want to take a bag.
Oh my God. I forgot he says that. He's like, look, I know that you think that you're just going to lower him down, but let me just say things are loose.
And this is when she remembers what it was like. And then she tells Brown Ben that, because he's talking to Grey Worm about like, get a bag with your shuttles. And she's just like, yeah, dude, we know. He knows. And so do I. We all saw it. Thank you very much. And then there is Miss Sandy who pops in, and she's just like, locally they inter their dead in crypts. If you boil the bones, return them to their kin, it would be considered as a kindness. To which Daenerys is like, all right, well then we'll do that. But thinks to herself, these bitches are still gonna curse my name regardless of like what I do to these bodies. But
I'm wondering if, because I could have sworn that I saw some stuff about this, that in the show she doesn't agree to send their bones back. So again, it felt like the show was really kind of going hard on having her be pretty ruthless sooner than the books do. Because I mean, like, there's no real reason to just not do this. It's just mostly that it wouldn't do her any good, but she still feels like it's a kindness that matters anyway, even if it's not going to give her any material gain.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and it definitely speaks to the type of leader she's at least attempting to be. Where if the show opted to leave this out, and I can't remember if they do or don't, but if they opted to not include this small thing, then they are definitely trying to paint her in a different light than the book is showing her to be at this moment,
Yeah.
But again, they were in such a rush. Maybe they were just, they knew where they were heading, and they were just painting her into this corner so that when she turns, where we were all supposed to be like, because remember at the end, one of the things that happened was there was like a camp of people who were like, this is nonsense. This ending is terrible. Show, what are you doing? And then there was a camp that was like, if you had just been paying attention, and then they pointed out all these different things that had happened previously.
Yeah.
And this feels like this would have been a moment that people would have been like, see, and she could have been kind, but she chose not to. Why didn't she just bury them the way, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh, maybe the show is planning that so that they can lean back later and be like, see, we were trying to show you.
Yeah, that's interesting. And again, I just feel like it all depends on the execution as well. Just because ending up somewhere technically might make sense when you add evidence together in an empirical way does not mean that the ending feels like it makes sense as an organic story when you watch it. So, but whatevs. Who cares?
So we find out that there are some people that want an audience with her, and the first one is a sort of emissary from it's not Astapor. Is it Astapor?
No, it is Astapor.
It is Astapor.
Yeah.
And we find out that since our girl has left for other pastures, Astapor has gone through some changes. And instead of the Council of Three that she had left in charge, which was supposed to rule a healer, a scholar, and a priest, this guy, who I don't think he's telling the truth. It's just like those sly rogues betrayed your trust. And our great Cleon exposed their plots and hacked their heads off with a cleaver. And is now in charge. Miss
So
Sandy
you don't think
this
that's
guy.
true?
I mean, I don't know.
The betrayal.
What they were betraying. What exactly were they trying to accomplish? What was their plan that was discovered? Like, he doesn't say any of that. He just says they were scheming to restore the good masters to power and the people to chains. I guess that's possible, but I choose not to believe it, and I'll tell you why I choose not to believe it. This is not necessarily well thought out, but this is why I don't believe it. Because that would mean that Daenerys chose poorly, right? And I don't want that for her.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay.
But whatever has happened, those dudes are gone, and now Cleon the Cleaver is in charge, and Miss Sandy is familiar with this guy. You know, is this the same Cleon?
I love this so much.
Right? Like,
she's asking all these questions that he's just like rubbing the back of his neck and looking at the floor. Just like, well, you know, who can say?
Right,
it's certainly possible that this is the butcher man that you speak of. And he says something, because the whole thing is like a marriage proposal. He'll give you many sons. Has he given his other wives sons?
It's so good. It's so good.
Excuse me, I just questioned in the back here.
And the way that she asked the question is like so innocent, you know. It's her voice was guileless. Like, she's just like, how about that? That guy, the butcher, huh? I knew a guy named the butcher in the kitchen. And then she whispers and tells Daenerys like what the what is about this man, and it does not sound great. And Daenerys is just like, oh, fuck. This is what I gave to Astapor? This fucking guy? This is it now? A Butcher King? She's feeling a real way about it. And then, we get this absurd marriage proposal, to which Daenerys has to be really careful about how she responds. You know, she can't just be like, the fuck makes you think I would ever? Which is, I think, would have been the appropriate answer.
Oh, that is a really good way to say that. The fuck makes you think I would ever?
And there's and he's telling her also that, like, the reason you should think about this marriage proposal is because we have the same enemies. You know, there should be a pact between Astapor and Mereen, because the Yunkai are out there trying to, you know, build back what Daenerys took from them, build back the slavers, get their money back, you know. And he even says something about they are trying to get other cows involved. Like they sent riders out to the Dothraki land to try to bring them in against Daenerys. Which, again, I don't know how much truth there is to that, because I don't know how honest this guy is being.
That's a really interesting question. Just like in general, how much one can trust the emissaries, and like, it's easy to sort of be like, well, who would know? But she could sort of send people out to verify these claims.
She could.
And they have to know that she has that resource. Right. So would they lie? Would they risk it? I don't know.
It's hard to say because I don't know. Like, we've been watching Daenerys move through the world, right, on her way back towards Westeros and following her very many adventures. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem to me like she ever sends anyone backwards to see what's going on where you left. Like, personally, if you wanted to have real talk about this, why doesn't she know what happened to Astapor already? You know what I mean?
Question.
Why doesn't she have people there that can send ravens or whatever the fuck to keep her abreast of what's happening in these places she's liberated? It doesn't feel like she's checked back on that shit at all. So this guy shows up and it's like, oh yeah, the 3 you left are gone, and now this guy's in charge, and da 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 da. And she doesn't have any of this information. Why not?
That's an interesting question. Well, yeah, she's been a little bit forward moving. I mean, you were saying that you didn't want her to believe that she had chosen poorly about who she left the city in the hands of. That's your desire. But do you think that's true or not?
See,
in reality?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, as we watch her struggle to make these decisions, that as she's in Mereen, struggling to make these decisions in Mereen, when you put it on the table, you have to, and if you think about every forward motion, also hopefully representing growth and experiencing, having learned a lesson. If you believe things work that way going forward, then you also kind of have to accept that the things you did in the past, maybe not your best work, you know? So yeah, when you think about it, maybe she did not choose well. Which, she's young and still learning on the fucking, like, literally learning on the fly how to be a leader, how to make these choices. It would not be unimaginable that she chose the wrong people. Or maybe they were going to be the right people, and then she leaves and they realize she didn't leave nobody to check on us. Ain't nobody here reporting back to her about what the fuck we're doing. And then their access to power eventually corrupts them, and then they end up, being, as what did he call them? Sly rogues.
Yes.
Which
I do enjoy.
I do too.
Sly rogues. It makes them sound a little bit too much charming, though. Like, they're just, amiable miscreants. They get up to their mischief.
That's perfect the way you said it, though, because what it does is by calling them sly rogues, it takes off the blame from her choosing poorly, and it's just like, you got taken in by those very clever chaps. It could have happened to anyone. So it's like, it's a way to be like, yeah, those guys you left in charge weren't shit, but it's not your fault. We're not holding that against you.
Yeah, that's interesting. Huh. I didn't really think of that, but that maybe he's trying to make her feel like less culpable.
Yeah, or at least like trying to keep, not doing whatever he can to keep her from being on the defensive,
Yeah.
So yeah, he offers her this marriage. We find out that he's got a handful of wives. He's got like the old one. He's got 2 newer wives. It doesn't say his 2 new wives. It says 2 of his newer wives, which means there's probably more than 2.
Oh yeah, definitely. But he'll set them all aside for you.
How noble of him, she says. And then she just is like, I'm going to think about all this, and y'all go put him somewhere else. And then she is left once again thinking to herself about, like, she says, whatever I do, all I make is death and horror. Which is just like, Jesus Christ, girl. That's not all you do. And then she starts thinking about Jorah a little bit. And then chastises herself. No, don't think of him. I'm not going to think of him at all. We're just going to let him sit off to the side for a little bit.
So then we have the master of the Indigo Star, who is Carthene, and he cries, because I had forgotten that the whole thing with like the Carthene people is that crying is considered really elevated and noble. So the fact that he like weeps through this whole thing, I don't know why, but that shit cracked me up. The idea that like you could train yourself to cry because it's considered socially like I just can't imagine. And I know that it's not any different than just changing any of your other emotions to what's appropriate for your society, which we all do every day. But it just feels so much more performative because it involves bodily fluids, first of all, which like really, come on now. But yeah, this is the funny moment of just, oh no, now this guy is gonna fucking sob. All right, somebody go in back and get the case of the Kleenex out, the one with the lotion. He really needs that.
And he's crying about the same shit, you know, about what's going on in Astapor. The city bleeds, dead men are rotting in the streets, the pyramids are armed camps. There's no food, there's no slaves. And the children, my God, the children.
King Cleaver is what they're calling him.
Yep. King Cleaver's thugs have seized every highborn boy in Astapor to make new unsullied for the trade. And it says that the thing that surprised her the most was how unsurprised she was.
Sucks.
Yeah. And she's realizing that everything that's happening in Astapor, everything that's happening behind her, will happen in Mereen as well the minute she leaves. And this is when she doesn't make the decision here to us, but we begin to see that she's understanding that she can't just install people to be in charge. Like if she's going to rule, she has to be there. Otherwise, the shit is just going to devolve into a mess and be back where it was.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I mean,
this is the thing. And that's part of why I think he's telling the truth about the sly rogues. Because you can like set things up, but if people have always done things one way and you just come in and are like, we're not doing it that way anymore, stop. And then you leave and you don't give them any other option for how to do the thing. Like, what are they supposed to do?
Into what you know. Even if it is just a swap out, right? So like maybe the old masters don't come back, but the people that had been brutalized will just then try to ascend to that place of privilege so they can turn around and brutalize someone else, you know? So yeah, and she mentions here too that it's starting because she's got the slaves from the fighting pits that they had freed when they were sacking Mereen are already out in these streets causing problems, acting like they should be in charge because they can beat the shit out of anybody who, you know, challenges them.
Right.
And she says to this guy, she says, what do you want from me? And he wants slaves.
And she tries to be like, oh, we don't do that here. And then Dario steps forward and is like, actually, there are a lot of people who kind of want to go back to being slaves.
Yeah.
And she's like, they what now? And he explains that they're like highborn people who, for them, slavery was actually like a pretty cushy deal. And they were given food and nice clothes and a place to live. And right now they're fucking just living in the streets with nothing.
Yeah.
So it is preferable for them to be a slave than to be free, but fucking impoverished. And she's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess go ahead but they can't sell their wives and they can't sell their kids.
I can't remember if this is on the show either. I feel like on the show she was like a hard no. But I could be wrong, you know. Do you remember?
Yeah. I don't remember if she was a hard yes or no. I do remember that they did not distinguish between highborn slaves and regular like labor slaves.
Right.
So they just were like, oh yeah, everybody wants to be a slave again. But here it's like a particular class of people who had a good cushy deal.
Yeah.
These are like the office worker slaves who are like, no, I really miss going into my cubicle that's not so bad for me.
Yeah.
But all the slaves who were working at Burger King are like, nah, I'm not doing that.
Take my chances out here.
Yeah.
So like she ends up conceding, and they come up with this compromise that an adult can sell himself into slavery or herself, but they can't sell their children, and a man cannot sell his wife. So basically, an individual, an adult, can choose to opt into slavery, but that's it. And Sandy mentions that, like, hey, and by the way, in Astapor, we took a cut of that money. And so Daenerys agrees to do that as well. So she is now in the slave selling business, slave trading business, even though it has been, it's been set up to seem more reasonable, and to seem
still, yeah.
It's set up to be very much like, well, yeah, these people are making their own choice to sell themselves into servitude. People will not be forced into it. We won't take children, but she's still now actively engaged in slave trade, which I just feel like is a real, really against everything she was trying to do. And,
I think that she's sort of like sees it as, I've wanted to free them. And if their choice is to go back into slavery, I guess that counts.
Yeah.
But it's really fascinating to think about, like, when it comes down to it, it's all about whether you have the resources to say no. So,
and that, like, the idea that you can, like, either you are abolishing slavery and it is not on the table for anybody, or you're not. There's not, there's really no middle ground there. I'm really sorry to anyone who thought there was, but there's not. There's, you know what I mean? So, I mean, like, not to, like, spend entirely too much time on this, but just even the idea of, like, what's being described here for these sort of more privileged class of slaves, there is absolutely no reason why that they can't function in this capacity and still be free. You can still be a tutor, a scribe, a hooker, a healer, a priest, whatever. These are all the things that Dario is saying slaves can be in the free cities if they're, like, of this elite class or whatever. There's no reason why, like, that is the only option. Either I'm starving to death in the street, or I'm a slave at, like, a fancy house. But I guess that's just where they are right now in Mereen, and those are the only options.
That's kind of how I see it, is like, they're not set up for regular capitalism. So they currently, like, can they find a home that they can afford to live in? Or, like, there's nothing set up except for the uber rich.
Right.
So,
but, like, there's to my mind, and it's funny too, because when you think about it, like, the very fine line between being enslaved versus being poor and just exploited, for very low wages,
wage slaves.
That if we are being about the business of creating a new world in Mereen, and then one of your first days, you're like, all right, well, we'll have slavery, but it'll be slavery light, it'll be like low fat slavery, like cheat day slavery. You know what I mean? Like, remember those Snackwell cookies?
Oh man.
It'd be like
So this is sharecropping.
So, like, low key. So I don't know. It would have been nice if there had been even a suggestion of the in-between, even if the in-between wasn't possible to implement on day 2 in Mereen, it would have been nice to just have a paragraph where we are considering an alternative before we just dip right back into, all right, we're taking 10% of the slave trade, but it's not going to be, like, as terrible as it was before.
Yeah.
But instead, I guess in order to show us what an impossible situation that Daenerys is in, we give her this really, like, hard, impossible choice, So yeah,
it's just I do kind of appreciate the whole like saying you're going to free everybody is swell, but you have got to have some sort of infrastructure, safety net, anything in place to replace that structure with, and you better have that shit set up, because otherwise, you know, what are people supposed to do? Yeah. And that's kind of the issue, is I think she didn't foresee the collapse and how utter it would be. So now that everybody's like, well, I didn't have it that bad, can I just do that again? She's truly blindsided by it, because to her it's just, well, freedom is more important than anything, and they're like, that's also really easy to say.
We also would like to eat, but you know, but and again, that's what I mean by like, and maybe we get it a little bit later on. I think that there was some talk about it in the show later of just like how do we build this new world that I'm trying to build, like the infrastructure of it, the actual things that allow a society to function, like how do we do that? And it just seems to me like this goes really quickly from like, I don't know, absolutely not, to like, okay, yeah, we'll do it this way. And I get it. You know, she's also like still very young, still trying to figure out. She does not have the answer. Like, this is a difficult fucking question of how do you build a new world? Yeah. And she doesn't have the answer to that question. So Dario comes in with this compromise that seems to solve an immediate problem. But it's just, you know, I don't know, a little bit of a, maybe this is unfair of me, but like, could we just have a conversation a little bit like longer than 2 seconds before we just agree to go back to this?
Yeah, you know? No, I get that.
But then she turns around and she's just like, all right, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to keep some really fucking clean, meticulous records, you know? Yeah. It feels like the record keeping is going to be around the money that's being earned, right? But I like to think it's also going to be about keeping an eye on who's ending up back in slavery and making sure that we are not taking people who don't agree, you know, like it doesn't say it explicitly, but I have chosen to decide for myself that this record keeping is not just about the money, but also about making sure that people don't take advantage of this compromise that she's letting happen.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And so she sends them out and says that she has a little bit of a problem too, like who she's gonna have in charge of this, because she's like, the Stormcrows, they're gonna take half the gold. Fucking Second Sons, they gonna take the other half. The Unsullied, they would not steal a dime, but these motherfuckers don't read. So the first part of the plan is they have to go out and find some freedmen amongst the citizens who can then do the work of keeping the records and keeping track of the money and write and all that stuff. So this turns into yet another sort of civic task that she has to be in charge of. And it's all part of building this new world. Yeah. And she's, again, just like after this day, she doesn't seem like she feels great about this decision she had to make today.
Yeah, definitely not.
You know, and she's feeling literally sick and in need of her knights. I need my knights. I need their swords. I need their counsel. And then it says the thought of seeing Jorah just makes her sick all over again. And finally she breaks down and she says, tell Belwas to bring my knights. My good knights.
She says good nights.
Yeah, she does.
I guess.
So yeah, Belwas brings them up. One of them knows the assignment. One of them does not.
So let's start with the one who knows the assignment. They get led in front of her and they stop in front of the bench. I swear to God, this motherfucker. So I'm sorry. I'm just looking at this because Jorah is just so, he is just so in a different world is the only way that I can put it. Like, he just does not understand his own situation here.
Mm-hmm.
He really has the energy of somebody who thinks like, I'm mommy's favorite and she would never, you know? So Sir Barristan walked in with his head held high, but Sir Jorah stared at the marble floor. The one is proud, the other guilty. And Barristan doesn't say anything, and Jorah starts to speak without being asked,
without
which is right
being
away.
asked, and calls her Khaleesi. Which granted was a title, but also between the two of them feels much more of like almost like a pet name, you know? That is not the way she needs to be addressed in this moment.
Yep.
So that's two. That's strike two. One, you're talking. Two, you're saying the wrong fucking thing. You're calling her out her name, and for this, you know, for this circumstance. She tells him to be quiet, and you'll speak when I tell you to speak. And then
I will tell you when to speak. When I sent you down into the sewers, part of me hoped I'd seen the last of you. Yada, 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 yada. My brother would have hanged you both. I will admit you helped me win this city. We won you this city. We sewer rats. Be quiet, she said again. Indeed it is. And she's thinking to herself about the fact that the stories that she heard about them going into the tunnels and like what it was like down there. And it was pretty harrowing. It sounds like.
Yeah, it doesn't sound great. Luckily, like the fucking, there's a sentence that says something like, luckily the waist was only like thigh high. Like that was the luck.
God. One of them gets like dragged off by basically like an alligator or something. Some fucking creepy sewer monster. You helped win this city, she repeated stubbornly, and you have served me well in the past. And yet you lied. You deceived me. You betrayed me. And she starts with Barristan. And she's like, so, what the fuck with you? Because you were with my father, and then you abandoned Viserys, and you went over to fucking Robert. And Barristan tells her the truth.
Yeah, he does.
Which is pretty remarkable,
yep,
to be honest.
He admits it, like some things are going to be hard to hear. Right? And so first of all, Robert was a good knight. He was chivalrous, he was brave, and he spared my life and the lives of many others. So I know you don't want to hear that, but that's what that was. Then he reminds her that Viserys was a boy. He wasn't someone that I could just go follow. And real talk between me and you, I didn't like the little shit. I saw some shit in him when he was little that I didn't care for. Some shit that looked a little bit too much like his father.
Yeah. Your father is called the Mad King in Westeros. Has no one ever told you? Viserys did. The usurper called him that. The usurper and his dogs. It was a lie. Why ask for truth if you close your ears to it? I told you before that I use a false name so the Lannisters would not know that I'd joined you. That was less than half of it. The truth is I wanted to watch you for a time before pledging you my sword to make certain that you were not my father's daughter. Mad, he finished. But I see no taint in you. Taint? Dany bristled. And this is when he does... A lot of people know about the Targaryens being a little bit dancing on the edge of crazy a lot of the time. King Jaehaerys once told me that madness and greatness are two sides of the same coin. Every time a new Targaryen is born, he said, the gods toss the coin in the air and the world holds its breath to see how it would land.
Yeah, I love this moment because when he tells her, first of all, that's just great. That's just a great little passage right there. But I love this because as he's talking to her, she realizes this man knew my fucking grandfather.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit, this man could tell me almost everything I've ever wanted to know about my fucking family. He would have forgotten more than the two of them talking about her brother and Jorah would have ever even known, like this is a fucking treasure trove standing in front of me right now.
Yeah, I really appreciated that a lot.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing that I don't really think about as somebody who like has connection with my family or would if I really cared that much about it. So it's not really something that like would be at the top of my mind, but it makes total sense for her.
Yeah. And so I think she says something to him like, so I'm just a coin in the hands of the gods. And he's like, no. And then he does the right things. Like, you are the true born heir of Westeros, and starts to pledge to her and says, if you don't want me, you know what? I'll go back to being a squire to Strongbow House. And she's like, all right, really? Anything? All right. Well, what if you're going to be my cook? And he's like, I make a really good roast duck. Just like, I
swear to God.
Like, just, I don't know. When you say someone is saying all the right things, usually that is implying that they're not genuine. But I don't mean it. I mean, this motherfucker is saying all the right things.
I do have to laugh at, he doesn't say I make a good roast duck. He's like, I've roasted ducks. If you like them.
Greasy. That's right. He says greasy with charred skin and bloody bones. That's right. That is not a good duck.
So she says, Ben Plum, come and give Barristan his sword. And Barristan is like, no. Look, I am only going to accept my sword back from your hands. And she has him swear to her service and then has to turn to Jorah.
And she thinks to herself about Selmy that he was the easy one. This other one is going to be harder. And the minute it's his turn to speak, y'all, the minute it is just excuses. And fucking the first thing he says is like, I tried to tell you the truth 100 times. You don't listen to me. I told you that arson was more than seemed. I warned you about, Paya Pri and Zero and blah, 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 blah. This is not the right energy to be bringing as you are begging for your life and forgiveness for this huge fucking betrayal. And she says, yeah, you warned me against everybody but your fucking self, which, and it doesn't. Correct. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop him. Like, this should have been like a chance for him to realize, okay, course correct. I'm doing this wrong. Let me figure out something else. Let me shut the fuck up. Something. And she thinks to herself, he should be fucking humbler. He should be begging for my forgiveness. And he's not at all.
No.
He's just
entitled.
She says
it's like the same energy that he has had towards her this whole time of just being like, well, why don't you just marry me? Like, who the fuck are you?
Yeah. She says to him, you are like, you would tell me trust no one but you. And all the time you were the spider's creature. And he gets all indignant. I'm no man's creature. Oh yeah, I took the gold. Yeah. And then, I wrote some letters, but that's all. Like, that dude, that's everything. What are you talking about?
That's all of it. Like, yeah, what do you think she's mad about, sir?
And then he says, but I stopped it. I did it for a little while, but then I stopped. And she wants to know, when was the last time you sent a report? And it's as recent as Cart, which she is just like, really? That recent?
Yeah.
And then there's a moment where she like it connects for her that Jorah actually told Robert and whoever else that she was pregnant. And
this was rough.
There's a moment like all Jorah gets out is Khaleesi, and then Selmy is like, don't even fucking think to deny it, sir. I was in the room. I was there. And there was even
Robert decreed that her grace and her child must die.
Yep.
You were the source.
Yep.
There was even talk that you might do the deed for a pardon.
Yep. And Jorah is just like, that's a lie. I would never. And then starts talking about all the ways he saved her. It was me who stopped you from drinking the poison wine. And she's like, yeah, and how'd you know the wine was poison, though?
Yep.
Best he can do is, I suspected. Caravan brought a letter from Varys. He warned there would be attempts. Varys wanted you watched, but not harmed. Now he's on his knees. If I had not told them, somebody else would have. That's his defense. If I had not snitched, there would have just been another snitch.
That is so feeble.
That's the best he can do, y'all. Mm-mm.
Man.
Mm-mm.
Like, I am embarrassed for you, sir. Truly. Come now.
Yeah.
Really?
It's pathetic is what it is.
Pathetic.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's looking at him. And now he's starting to beg. And she's just like, it's too late. You should have fucking started this begging my fucking forgiveness. And she thinks back on what they did to that wine cellar and how they dragged it behind her horse.
That was a pretty brutal moment.
Yeah,
She's just like, I know what I did that one time, and he wasn't close to me.
Yep.
He wasn't somebody that I had used to trust, so...
And she's looking at him, and she's thinking to herself, though, but this is like my bear. This is my knight. You know? My right arm, she calls him, that never failed me. I'd be dead without him. But she can't forgive him. I can't forgive you, she says. I can't. And he then is like, oh, you forgave the old man. Jorah, the fuck? Come on.
I swear to God. He lied to me about his name. You sold my secrets to the men who killed my father and stole my brother's throne.
How do you not see how this is different? I protected you. I fought for you.
Daenerys, I have loved you. He calls her by her fucking first name.
Yep.
Like, they're like that.
Yep. In front of God and everybody.
This fucking man.
Yep. And then she's like, fuck. That's it. That's the third one. The 3 treasons. For blood, for gold, and for love. And she decides that...
I feel like this one's for gold.
This one?
He didn't betray her for love. You know what I'm saying?
I see what you mean. But, what do I want to say about that?
Any theories?
I agree Jorah's betrayal isn't for love. He definitely thinks that his love will excuse the betrayal. Thinks that his love absolves him of that betrayal. Mm-hmm. But I think I agree. This wasn't for love. Unless in Jorah's twisted mind, he thinks that being in league with the people that wanted to harm her was a way to also protect her by knowing like what they had planned, you know? Like when he talks about Varys warned us that attempts were coming, almost as if I hadn't been working with the spider, then the spider could have never warned me to save you from the poison wine, you know?
Right.
But I don't think that counts as betraying for love, which means that the third one might still be out there. I don't want to get sidetracked into that though, but I will be thinking about it. So she ends up banishing him, tells him to go wherever the fuck you want. Go back to King's Landing and get your pardon that was so important to you. Or you can go to Astapor if you want. And he calls her by her name again.
I can't. I was mad that she doesn't like... She says, don't speak my name again, but that's not like... It makes it sound like the fact that he just said her name. It's not... It's the presumption of it for me that I find so inexcusable. And I wish that she had said it the first time when he calls her Daenerys. Like, how can you fucking just call me? Like, no. But
he is definitely a man that does not understand his place at all.
He starts to touch her. Like,
I don't understand.
Truly,
how does he not know how you behave? Like, this is your fucking queen. How many times have you stood around and watched, you know, people interact with, someone of noble blood that's of higher station, He's a fucking knight. He knows the rules, but thinks that they don't apply to him. That's special. He's special. So she tells them, you got till morning, I think. You got till the sun comes up to get the fuck out of this town. If I see you again, I'm going to give the word, and fucking Belwaz is going to rip your head right off your fucking shoulders.
Yep.
And then she has them drag him out, and she looks away until the doors are closed because she doesn't really want to watch that happen. And then she is just sitting there feeling so abandoned and so alone. He's gone. My father, my mother, my brothers, Sir William Derry, Drogo, Drogo's son who died inside me, and now Jorah. They're all gone.
I felt so bad for her here, man.
Dario slides up yo, real talk. You're going to want to get that head on a stake. You cannot just let him be out there. He is more dangerous than all of and he names some people I don't recognize, Osnox and Meryl's rolled up in one. You don't even have to say the word. He calls Daenerys his radiance, which I'm here for. Just give the tiniest nod and your Dario will fetch you back his ugly head. To which she's like, nah, you don't have to do that. Scales are balanced. Let him go.
I guess.
Yeah, I don't feel like they're balanced at all. But
this is the thing that's always it reminds me of that meme that was going around a bit back, which was if you want to really learn what forgiveness is, forgive someone who isn't even sorry. And the response was, not to be dramatic, but I would literally rather die. And that's the thing for me is I know the point of forgiveness is supposed to be that you do it for you. You don't do it for the sake of the other person. But it is really difficult for me to grasp forgiving somebody who seems to have no real understanding of what they did wrong, because I don't feel like forgiveness does anybody any good if they haven't learned anything, and if you can't trust that they won't inflict that damage somewhere else again, then I'm just kind of it doesn't feel meaningful. That forgiveness is just you going, oh, just forget it, in a way that's you know what I mean? I need a person. It's the same thing as just being oh, I'm sorry, and then you don't actually change anything about your behavior because you aren't sorry about having done the thing. You're sorry that you got caught doing the thing. But you just keep doing it anyway. It's even worse than that because you're not apologizing for the thing you did wrong because you don't get what you did wrong to begin with. You're still out here defending yourself and acting like she's overreacting. And forgiveness is just not on the table for me with a person who's standing there trying to continue justifying themselves. That you sold out her unborn child. What, sir? For real? Do you really think that you can just walk away from this and go back to being in her service the same way? What fucking planet are you on?
When you talk about that kind of meme and you see those things going around all the time, I think that there has been a real disservice when we have changed what forgiveness means and made it into these other things. When you talk about, oh, you gotta, forgiveness is for you, not for the person that wronged you. That is, in my mind, not really about forgiveness at all. That's you work. That's about you. It doesn't have anything to do with what the other person did. If you can get to a place where you let go of whatever hurt or harm you were carrying, that, again, completely separate from the person that hurt you. That's something that you do inside. It doesn't have anything to do with forgiveness or not. And I don't like that people have sort of tied those two things together. This sort of idea that you can't heal unless you forgive the people that hurt you, because as long as you hold on to that hurt, you can't heal. I think you absolutely can heal without forgiving the people that hurt you. Absolutely. I think those are two entirely separate things, two separate functions. And I don't like the way we sort of been, to overuse an overused word, gaslit into believing that they're tied together. You know, so that my forgiveness of you is required for me to heal and move on. No, it's not. It is not at all.
Yeah, people equate not forgiving with holding a grudge, and those are not the same thing.
Yep. Exactly. But so poor Khaleesi. So she
it's been a long ass day.
It's been a really long day. So she's like getting into bed. She needs to get some help undressed, and she gets in bed with is it Eerie?
Yeah.
She gets in bed with somebody. She asks for like this book she likes to read, which is basically like a kid's fairy tale book almost. It's like history but written for children. And oh my God.
I like when she says something about how you could always tell the bad guys because of their shifty eyes.
And she doesn't sleep well, and she wakes up, I think, in the middle of the night, and Selmy finds her at some point, right? She's just like out on her little balcony or whatever. And he comes to talk to her, or she has summoned him, maybe?
Let's see. She closed the book. She fled from the choice out onto the terrace, and she's watching her dragons here, which is an interesting moment because she's sort of like, man, they're flying out doing their own thing, and there may be a day when they just don't come back to me, which is a pretty like sad thought that she has no control over whether they did come back or not.
Yeah, and especially
this is when Barristan joins her.
So embarrassed, not embarrassed. She's feeling so abandoned by these people in her life that are no longer there. That her brain goes to, well, shit, when are my dragons going to fucking bail? You know?
Yeah,
it'll be as out of my control as all these other ones have been. And then Selmy comes and finds her because he's thinking, you know, she might have some questions. Maybe she wants to ask me some shit. I was around for a while. And he says, a knight of the King's Guard is in the king's presence day and night, and our vows require us to protect his secrets. But your father's secrets belong to you now, along with his throne. And I thought perhaps she might have questions for me. And I love that.
Yeah, agree.
And she does. She has a million questions. And she starts, you know, asking about this talk of madness. And then he starts to answer about what Viserys was as a child and how he was. And she stops him and she's like, wait, do I want to fucking hear this now? Which is so like emotionally mature of her, because I don't know if I would have stopped myself, you know?
Yeah.
I probably would have been completely forgotten what a horrible day I had and how emotionally I had nothing left. I would have been like, yeah, tell me all the terrible shit and tell it to me right now.
Yep, same.
Thank God
honestly.
she has better sense than that. And she asks him, and he thinks about it for a second. And he's like, you know what? Yeah, maybe right now. No, not right now. But we'll do it one day. And the last thing she says to him about that is she's just like, you can tell me the good and the bad. And then she's like, there is some good, right?
And he's like, there is. And I was like, I hope so, because that's a real awkward position to be in, where it's just like, no, I hated that motherfucker. And you don't have a good thing to say about him.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't heard anything good about him.
It's true. There's been very little
good, you know, redeeming qualities about the Mad King that I am aware of.
Yeah.
Like the best thing he's done so far is just have like all that wildfire stashed underground, so Tyrion was able to save them. And then look how that worked out for Tyrion. So
that's true. Yeah, thankless job,
right? But he does say there is good stuff, and you know, your grandfather and his brother and your mother and Rhaegar, him most of all, which is really nice because it sounds like he has a lot of good things to share with her about her brother. And she thinks about her brother as she's going to bed, wondering, like, did he ever grow weary? You know, Did her father, did any of her like ancestors, was it just ever too much? Did they ever get tired? And then she has a little dream about Dario, a little something, something.
Yeah, she does. And she takes Eerie to bed. And I think the like transition into the dream that she has about him is because she's like having sex with Eerie and picturing him.
She pretended it's Drogo, but then Drogo's face somehow keeps turning into Dario.
So weird, right? I do like that she's like, if I want Dario, I need only say so. And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's true. You could just be like, hey, you out there, babe? Come on in.
And then there's a moment where she's like a little bit tempted. She's like, you know what? Maybe I'll just call that motherfucker in here. But she says, it says for a moment Dany was tempted, but it was Drogo she wanted. Or perhaps it was Dario. But either way, it wasn't Eerie. That's not who she was looking for in this moment. And then she gets up from bed. And
the maid was sweet and skillful, but all her kisses tasted of duty.
Yeah, she wants passion. She wants somebody to want to be with her and to love her, and that's what she's missing. And she sneaks out of bed again, and is like leaning over, looking down on the city that's hers now, and trying to like remember who the fuck she is. We get a whole, like, her whole name, and Miss Sandy comes and finds her and looks in on her and asks how she is doing. And this is when she says, I was looking for a house with a red door, which is from her, like her sort of like dream at the temple in Karth, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And but she tells Miss Sandy that it's too dark and they all look the same. And this is when she asks her, like, tells her, like, never lie to me, never betray me. Yeah, poor Miss Sandy. It's a lot for this little girl. I mean, they're both pretty little girls. Yeah. What is Daenerys here, like 16? Maybe by now 16. Miss Sandy's probably like what, 13 or 14 maybe now. She's like 11 when they find her. Maybe she's maybe 13 is even too high. But so they're listening to the sounds of the city, and then the morning comes, and she summons all her people, and she announces to all of them that they are going to stay in Mereen. She's going to stay and rule and be a queen. She is not going to march west just now. Yeah.
What do you think of this choice?
Well, we had talked before, and I was aware that there was something about Daenerys getting stuck in Mereen. I like that. I guess it would be very frustrating as a long-term reader if she's just there and doesn't make any forward momentum because we're wanting her to like march to Westeros. But I like that she has decided to stay as opposed to like, she's so mired down and can't get out. Like she's made a choice that no, I'm going to stay here and rule. So I like that. That's how that's at least starting. Maybe it turns into sort of this pretzel she can't get out of. But I like at least at the beginning, it's her saying, no, I'm not going to just leave the city to fall. I'm going to stay here and rule. So I'm okay with it for now, at least.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Her being like, look, I get that this isn't my city and it's not the same as Westeros, but if I don't even know how to handle this place, how am I going to go there and take over a place that's like, this is a city.
Exactly.
That's a whole continent practically.
Exactly. And also, like, why would this place want me to show up if I have just left a trail of destruction behind me, where the only thing my name is known for is, I show up, fuck shit up, and then I bounce and leave them to all fend for themselves. Like, that's not the reputation you want, following your name as you're like heading in, to Westeros to conquer. That's, you know what I mean? That's not great. So I like this choice. I think it is the right choice. This is book 3 out of 5 that are completed. So I guess if we get to book 5 and she's still there in Mereen, maybe I'll start to get frustrated as well, being like, what the fuck? But for now, I'm okay with it.
Yeah. I I understand the the frustration that some people have with it, but I feel like it makes a lot of sense, because like the whole thing, if you're raised as someone who is the heir to a throne, is that you get to like sit in on meetings and watch decisions being made and how they pan out, and you get that kind of like internship basically.
Yep.
So she's just trying to create that for herself, which, you know, I feel like it's actually a pretty smart move.
Absolutely. Yeah, she needs to know how to run. She needs to know how to rule, you know, and yeah, and how to deal with because her idea, like going into Westeros too, is going to be it's not as extreme as like where she's been going through these slaver cities and completely upending their way of life, but still, she's like bringing some changes with her.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and she needs to learn how to deal with opposition and how to rule over a whole city or a whole country when really only part of them supported you. You know, it's that really fucking dopey thing that our politicians say all the time. You know, have you ever heard that thing where it's like, when you're running for president, you know, you're running against half of the country. But then once you become president, you have to learn how to rule the whole country. It's like something every president says, like every time. They can't help themselves. There's always a variation on that theme, you know. I was running, and even though not everybody supported me, but now that I'm here, I'm going to be president of all of America, not just half of America. Like, they all say that shit.
You know what? All right. Let's say hi to new patrons, shall we? I don't even want to engage with that. I'm tired. The whole fucking thing makes me so tired. Why we just...
Don't even. New patrons!
It doesn't have to be like this, you guys. It just doesn't have to. Why? We just lack imagination. You know, we really do. Anyway, okay. So, you ready? Are you ready, you guys? Woo! We've got Laura Bianoff and Antoinette K.
Yay!
Woo! Welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for becoming patrons. And hopefully y'all are listening to, if not the current Sookie Stackhouse coverage, then the, you know, all the archived stuff that we have covered over the years. There is so much content, you guys. I forget. And then somebody will be like, you should cover XYZ. And I'm like, I did. I covered that 7 years ago with the co-host that I haven't co-hosted with in a really long time, because I don't record as much as I used to, which is wild because I record 11 times a week. But yeah, the amount of stuff available for $5 patrons is substantial. And I also wanted to mention here, I had meant to say something on the Ray Bear episode last night, but we were running out of time, that I'm going to be moving forward with a change to the Harry Potter feed. I've been sort of struggling over what I'm going to do because of the developments with J.K. Rowling, and feeling very mixed about the fact that I'm like drawing in new patrons through that public feed that has me and RoShawn talking about the series in a very different tone and different energy than we would carry with For It Now. And with the understanding that like our positions have changed, it's still strange when something's sort of frozen in time. And I have decided, after a suggestion from Yama in the patrons only group, to pull the Harry Potter feed from public and turn it private and make it patrons only. So I'm going to be doing that mid-March. I think I'm going to do the 15th. I'm going to be deleting everything that's not related to the books from the feed, because currently we've got like some Akio box stuff. We've got you and me covering the John Wick movies are on that feed, a bunch of other like extra stuff. So I'm going to take those eps off, and I'm going to add the remainder of the reread to it as well, because
that one's split, right?
Yeah, the reread, we stopped having it be public at book 3, I think, and the rest of it was only on Patreon. And Patreon is not the easiest to navigate when you're trying to just listen to one series straight through. So I'm going to add all of the reread to that feed, and that way everything is in one place, and the URL for it to reach it on the Spreaker website, as well as the private RSS feed link so that you can add it to your podcatcher, will be given to patrons when they sign up. So, and that'll be $5 and up patrons, because that's the lowest tier that I've got at the moment. And yeah, I just wanted to, everybody who's already a patron, it's still going to be there in the feed like it's always been. I'm not taking it off of like Patreon, but I just thought it would be nice for it to be on its own feed. That would be a little bit easier to navigate. And this way, a lot of folks, like the work that RoShawn and I did on it, it's very important to them, and it's like a comfort show for them. And I totally respect that. And for me, it was a big deal. It was a lot of work we put into it, and we did it in good faith. And it was the foundation in a lot of ways for what Unspoiled is now. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to just get rid of it, but I had to find a sort of middle ground between just completely making it disappear or leaving it exactly as it's always been, which also didn't quite feel right. So this is a compromise I have come up with. So just to all of you out there, if you are somebody who listens via the public feed, just alert that by the 15th, it's going to not be showing up for you anymore. And then also, of course, once I make it patrons only, the ads aren't going to be on there anymore. I'll disable the ads. But yeah, so
that's going to cost you some income, right? You're going to lose the income from those ads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't really know, like, I may gain some from people signing up to be patrons for the feed, but I don't really know how many people would become patrons for just that aren't already patrons.
Yeah, I don't.
You know what I mean?
I'm not looking at it like I mean, it's not for me to look at one way or the other. It's 100% your decision. But I hope people don't think that it's behind a paywall is like enticement. It is just like as a way, as a like an archive for people who are already part of the community, who not for nothing too. And I meant to mention that, I think we talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to mention it more when we had our snippet of a conversation about all this, is that a lot of the podcast itself is actually informed by our community that was with us at the time, because we talk so much about our listeners that were so engaged with us,
Yeah.
We were always talking about, this person sent us this thing, and they, you know what I mean?
Somebody commented this. Yeah,
exactly. So it's not just me and you talking about the thing, but it's also us talking about and to people that, experience that with us. So I'm glad that it's not just disappearing forever. And yeah, you probably will take a little bit of a hit on your income from loss of ads for that. But
yeah, I'm assuming most of my ad revenue comes from that feed, since it's by far the most listened to show.
Yeah, but that is what you are willing to do.
Yeah,
because
it just felt like the right call. And I was struggling because I wanted to do something, and I appreciate you, Yama, for putting that option out there, because it hadn't really occurred to me to do it that way. But, hopefully this will be for the best for everybody. I'll feel more comfortable knowing that it's a protected feed that isn't bringing people in who think that we're still of the opinions we were 5-6 years ago.
Right.
And, patrons will still be able to listen to it, and it'll be easier to listen to, even if they decide to use the private RSS feed and stuff. So, we'll see.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's cool. It will be kind of weird though, because I used artwork for every episode, and when I add all of the reread, the remaining like half of the series reread, I'm not going to upload art for every one of those. I'm just uploading all those episodes, and they're going up, and I won't have any info posted on them or anything like that, because that will take way too long.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a bunch of like really cute little entries of the artwork and me talking about what's in the episode, and then all of a sudden that's just going to be gone. It's just going to be a fucking logo. But nobody cares about that, I'm pretty sure. So all right, is there anything else you wanted to say before we wrapped up on this?
No, ma'am. Looking forward to the next 2 chapters, which I did not look ahead. Did I leave my bookmark in the
Don't look ahead. Don't do it.
Yeah. So I don't know what the 2 chapters are. I just want to make sure I have it in the right place. Perfect. So I don't have to go through this fucking nightmare every week. I don't know what the fuck, you guys. I really don't. Sometimes. Anyway, that's for another conversation.
There's a whole thing with Rayberry yesterday, guys.
You guys.
If you listen to that, you will find out.
Like, the fuck, RoShawn? The fuck? Bitch. A bitch go on vacation and then just lose all sense of common fucking sense.
I've had that happen, though. It's really crazy. I'll come back and it's like, I've never done this job in my life.
What the
I'm
fuck?
like, what is a mic? I've never heard of it. I knew a guy.
Oh, God. I knew a guy. Girl, bye, y'all.
Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Joffrey, Cersei, Walder Frey, Mereen, Tywin Lannister.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.